Welcome back. I'm Dr. Sheik and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And today we have another installment of We Need to Talk. And what we're going to be talking about today is what does it mean for you to have privacy, or what is confidentiality in terms of therapy? And it may not be what you think, because not everything you tell us in therapy will be kept confidential. As a therapist, as a psychologist, as a mental health clinician, all of us are considered mandated reporters. So are your teachers, so are your school administrators, so are those nurses and physicians that work in a hospital or work in a nursing home. We're all mandated reporters, and what that means is if someone reports to us any type of abuse or neglect of a vulnerable population, then we have to report that, because if we don't report it, then we lose our license. So not everything in a session is kept confidential. Now, most of the time, and hopefully for all of us, if we've gone to therapy, when you walk into that therapy room, your therapist will let you know what is and what is not confidential. Now, I have my spiel that I say at the beginning of every session before someone tells me anything about their lives, because I need it to be clear. I need them to know what is going to be kept confidential and what will not be kept confidential. So my spiel goes a little bit like this. Everything we say in this appointment will be kept confidential, except in the cases where you let me know that you are in immediate harm of hurting yourself or someone else. You report elder abuse, child abuse, or abuse of a person with intellectual disabilities or neglect. In either of those cases, I am a mandated reporter, and I will have to report it to the appropriate authorities. Are there any questions? And I want to encourage you to, if you have questions in that moment, I want you to ask those questions. I want you to be willing to say, what isn't confidential? Or what is the situation that I will tell you that you would need to report? What is something that you would need to let the appropriate authorities know, whether it's the Child Protective Services, whether it's a local authorities, whether it's the office that actually handles elder abuse. And I can't think of that office in this moment, but those individuals that actually deal with elder abuse cases. So those individuals that deal with any vulnerable population, if it's not clear, be willing to ask those questions. Now, there are standard confidentiality policies for all therapists. However, they differ from state to state. And you may want to just do some research and just look at what are the therapist confidentiality laws or rules in your specific state. And the things that we can keep confidential are most things. What we can't keep confidential are things such as you letting us know that a child is being abused, or a child is in a situation where abuse is possible, or there's neglect. We can't keep confidential if you let us know that an elder is being taken advantage of, whether financially or physically abused, or any type of neglect of an elderly person. We can't keep confidential if you let us know that someone who is mentally ill or someone who has an intellectual disability is being mistreated, being abused, or being neglected. We can't keep that confidential. In those cases, when you report either of those things have to be reported to the appropriate authorities in your state, because if we don't document it, if we don't report it, we have the potential to lose our licensure. And we have the ability to lose our livelihood and our ability to practice as clinicians. Also, we can't keep confidential if you're letting us know that you are in harm of hurting yourself. So that's suicidality. If you let us know that you're having thoughts of ending your life in any way, then we're not allowed to keep those things confidential. And I want to be clear, I work in suicide prevention on a daily basis. So I am not alarmed initially if I hear someone saying that they've been having thoughts of hurting themselves or harming themselves. I know the line of questioning. I know how to get a clear understanding of their level of intent, their urge, and the desire to engage in those behaviors. And I'm not always readily set to call the authorities. And normally when we have to report in those cases is when we're calling 911 services, or we are implementing involuntary hospitalizations. And most people don't like to be involuntarily hospitalized, or we actually try to get you to voluntarily hospitalize yourself. In all of those cases, if you are threatening to hurt yourself, if a clinician is not as well versed in understanding or is having concerns, maybe they're new, maybe they haven't worked with individuals who've had suicidal thoughts, then they may be more willing to initiate that involuntary process or the voluntary process of hospitalization. But I want to encourage you to have that conversation if you're having thoughts of hurting yourself or harming yourself in any way. Be open about your intent or your urges, because if your intent is to hurt yourself, we are are duty bound to report that as well, because we want to maintain your safety. Now, lastly, another thing that we are duty bound to report is if you are threatening to hurt someone else, or if you are threatening to engage in any type of criminal behavior. If you are letting us know that you are about to engage in criminal behaviors, we in most states are required to report that to the appropriate authorities. And in some cases, we have the Tariff law where we actually have to report your threat to a specific individual to that individual. Again, we are mandated to do these things. We are mandated to report these things. So if you are letting us know that you have intentions of hurting someone, especially if you have those intentions of hurting someone specifically, in most states, we are required to report that not only to the appropriate authorities, which in most cases are the police, but we're also required to warn. We have a duty to warn the other person that you are a threat to them. These are things that we are mandated and we have to receive extensive training on year after year to make sure we maintain our license. So understand that if you are going in the therapist's office, there are some things that we are mandated to report. There are some things that we can keep confidential. And in either of those cases, I want you to be willing to have a conversation with your therapist to make sure you are clear on what can and cannot be reported. Now, if you are under the age of 18, the age of consent is different in every state. So what that means is if you are going to therapy, if the age of consent is not the age you are at that time, let's say you're 16 and the age of consent is 18, in those therapy sessions, everything you discuss with your therapist, or most things you discuss with your therapist, can be told to your parents. So if you are going to therapy and you're under the age of 18 and you are considered a child, I'm going to tell you to look up the age of consent laws in your state as far as it relates to therapy and getting therapy services as a child, and what can and cannot be disclosed to your parents if they request that information, because there are certain things that we are required to disclose if you are not of legal age of consent in specific states. And there have been situations where I've had to report, and reporting is not easy. We don't sit in our office and just get gleeful at the idea of having to report someone to CPS, or having to report someone to police, or having to let someone know that someone is threatening to hurt them. Those things are never easy to do. And for most therapists, I'm not going to say all, but for most therapists, we tend to have that conversation directly with you when we have to actually mandatorily report something. And that's not an easy conversation to have with someone. And do we lose clients that way? Yes. We lose clients. It can cause a rupture in the trust that you have with someone. It can cause people to not trust their therapist moving forward. And all of those things are possible. And at the same time, we still have to report those things. There are still laws that we have to follow, because at the end of the day, what we have to make sure of and what we're trying to do is make sure that not only you are safe, but the community is safe, and that the vulnerable population is safe from neglect, from abuse, and from self-inflicted harm or harm to someone else. That is the overall goal. And it doesn't always lead to your children being taken away. It doesn't always lead to you having to deal with a court case. It sometimes leads to you, or at least this is what we're told, and this is what we hope happens, is that sometimes it leads to you having access to resources that you may not have had access to before. So what I hope you take from this today is that, yes, most things in therapy sessions are treated as confidential. However, there are specific cases where it's not going to be confidential. That's if you're talking about hurting yourself, someone else. You let us know that there is abuse happening to an elder, a child, or someone with intellectual disabilities, or a neglect is happening for either of those vulnerable populations, or in cases where you are not of legal age to consent to therapy, so your guardian is our actual client and we have to disclose certain things to that guardian, or if we are subpoenaed, like for court. Those are all of the times that we are required to break confidentiality. And if it's not clear, because I don't know your situation specifically, if you go to therapy and you are still having questions about this, ask your therapist. Have them be really clear and be very detailed about what they can and cannot report, because those reporting criteria, the policies, the procedures around being reported are different in different states. We needed to talk because it's not always confidential. And there are times that we need to break confidentiality, and that is rarely easy for us to do, even as therapists, even as individuals who may have done it on several occasions. I hope this gives you some information about what is and is not confidential in a therapy session. As always, please feel free to jot down any thoughts, questions, or comments you have below. I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.